Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I'll be your host for this episode of Secure Talk. Today, we're talking with Adrianus Warmenhoven, who is the defensive strategist for Nord Security. Adrianus has actually a very long and interesting background related to cybersecurity, and we're going to talk about some of that. And we're going to talk about some best practices related to individual security and also inside of different enterprises. Before we do that, though, let's welcome Adrianus. How are you today?
Hi, I'm fine. It's just a bit warm, but it's to be expected from the summer.
It's a bit warm. Are you in the Netherlands now? Where are you?
Yes, I'm in the Netherlands. I'm in the lovely city of Zwolle.
Zwolle. I've never been there. When you say warm, how warm is it?
At the moment, it's outside. It's like 24 degrees centigrade. But inside, with all the computers I have, it gets easily to like 32 at the moment. 32 degrees centigrade.
Yeah, I was going to say 24 is about perfect, but if you're indoors with that kind of ambient heat and you don't have much air circulating, that can be kind of stifling. I'm in Arizona right now at altitude, so it's what we would say mid 80s and 90s Fahrenheit. But if you just go down the road about 90 minutes to Phoenix, they're in the 110 Fahrenheit, which I have no idea what that is in Celsius, but I think it's approaching 40 degrees. It's god awful.
Yes.
So, well, hey, let me ask you. I mean, because you have, like I said, a long and interesting background related to cybersecurity. Why don't we just start off with your current role at Nord Security? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do as a defensive strategist?
I'm doing defensive strategy, and I'm also manager of the threat intelligence team for, and this is a whole mouthful, threat protection products. And let's unravel it by starting with threat protection products. The first thing to say about that is that at Nord, we believe in privacy, but also want to protect our users against some of the more prevalent malicious activities online. And that's what threat protection products is for. And we do things like anti-phishing, anti-trackers, which are in the browser, because even if you have a VPN, sometimes a browser or an advertisement setup or something else might be tracking you. There might be apps that are doing all of these kind of things. That's what threat protection products actually does. It's a complement to the VPN service for your privacy and security. My role in that is, as a defensive strategist, is I look at what are the most common ways of attacking our users or tracking them, and say, okay, these are the areas that we need to focus upon and which we need to do some extra research to find countermeasures against. And then the final part, the manager of threat intelligence. And threat intelligence is actually that we really look at which malware is currently rampant, which phishing campaigns are running, which tracker networks, like all the intelligence that goes into the products for which we make the security.
Well, let's kind of drill down on that bit. So what are you seeing in terms of the types of attacks and the types of malware that is being used? Is it the same old, or are you seeing anything different these days?
Now you see, of course, most of the malware it's really almost commoditized. It's almost a real business model where you can see that specific campaigns are being run by campaign runners. They have bought it from affiliates, and the affiliates have bought it again from the criminal organizations. So you see fewer different species of malware, but the malware is getting more and more advanced because there's much more money to be made of it. So there's a lot more development funding going on in the different types of malware. So this is kind of the trend that we're going, more advanced, fewer species, but with a lot more modules. We also see that the campaign runners, those are the people that get the malware into the client's device. We see those that they're using more phishing, more creative uses of phishing, that buy new domains. There's a lot of creativity on that end going on. So that diversifies, and the malware itself actually is how do you say that?
More lethal?
Yes, but it's also coalescing into into fewer types of malware. So where we see less diversity in the types of malware, we see more diversity in the ways of getting the malware to the client's devices.
So where's this malware coming from? I mean, I'm envisioning people write some code, and then they can make money from reselling the code, and then you have people who are actually, as you said, the runners,
Yes.
who are trying to inject that code into their targets. But where from what you see, where is the malware coming from? And I'm talking about just the original kind of creation or design coding of it.
Yes, there's quite some what we call actors, which are known to the various cybersecurity companies. They have different monikers with all of them, and you can see that there's quite a lot of it coming from Russia, actually. And this is not specifically because the current situation in Russia. It always has been Russia quite a lot because of some peculiar law deficiencies they have, where if no Russian entity is harmed, then Russian law enforcement will not make moves against those evil entities. So even if you can see this attack is coming from Russia, there's nothing you can do about it. You can mention it and hope that somebody will do a takedown, but probably not. So you will see a lot of it coming from Russia, but also some of it is coming from China, which is also quite nation state sponsored. And of course, there's a lot of it which is unknown, but which is has affiliations with different countries around the world. But currently, Russia is really number one.
Okay. In terms of phishing, give an example of some of the most creative things that you've seen recently.
Well, we've seen drop registration, which means that if a company forgets to renew their registration subscription, that the registration is really quickly bought by somebody else.
Are you talking about their domain or?
Yes, the domain.
Yeah. Okay.
But we also see homomorphic, which is a difficult way of saying characters, which in Unicode, which is all the character sets that we're using, they look the same to the user. If you visually look, like the character A has a similar character, which is not the character A, but it looks like it. So you can have domain names which to your eye completely look the same, but which are actually to computers something completely different. We see a lot of CEO fraud. We see a lot of if there's some churn in a company, like lots of people moving or joining, you see a lot of things like that, like this is your manager or this is HR, you need to respond to this survey. It's really very broad. I'm sorry. It's really very broad at the moment. There's not a small single thing that we can say, okay, only watch for this. Actually, everything that you can think of at the moment is being used, and even some last-ditch desperate efforts like the prince from Ghana, which everybody knows about as spam, but it's still being reused. I still get it in my mailbox, like, I'm from this country, I have lots of money, and I'm a refugee.
Help me. Yeah.
Yes.
I'll cut you in. I'll cut you in for $10 million because I need your help, and I'm so appreciative. Yeah, no, that's awesome, and it must work, because why would they keep doing these emails for so many years, right? And yeah, so let me ask you, because it's amazing. We have all this great, super sophisticated technology. The weakest link oftentimes continues to be just us, simple humans, right?
Yes.
So what advice would you give to people who are working inside of a company, and they see something that just their spidey senses start tingling, or as an individual who's a kind of on your own because you have got a different support structure.
Yes.
So what would you advise?
For a company, I would always, if you have any doubts about something, always contact your security department or security person or CISO or whatever you have in place, and don't start investigating on your own. Some of the tricks that we see are really sophisticated. Just give it to the security department. And there's also another reason why the security department needs to know about it, so they can see if there's a trend against their company. If nobody mentions it, they don't know that they're being targeted. And if they're being targeted, that might be that there are attacks on some other system. So always mention it to your security department. They will know what to do. If you're on your own, it's a bit different. There's different ways that you can check, but almost all of the links, you don't have to click them. You can just type in or get from your bookmarks the site that you want to visit. Let's say your bank sends you, or your credit card company sends you an email saying you must respond to this survey. Then don't click the link, but just take your favorites, your bookmarks, and then go to the site of your credit card company, log in as you normally would, and then you will find either a message in the message box or the link to that survey. There's no need to click on any link at all in an email.
I like that advice, and I think that's one major takeaway. There's never any real reason to click on a link in an email, and I think it goes beyond banks, or it can or credit card companies. If you book a hotel and you get a confirmation of the reservation, I always, that's some really good advice. Just go back to the site, whether it's booking.com or hotels. Whatever it is, log in, and if there's a message for you there, obviously your booking comfort, your reservation will be there, but just click on the links. All it takes is one little snippet of malicious code, and it could ruin your day.
Yes.
So, speaking of logging into accounts, how important do you think is a second factor authentication, or MFA or 2FA?
It's almost to the point of like basic necessity nowadays. There's a couple of things you should have, and I think having a password manager is one, and having MFA is the second part. And the reason why I mentioned password manager, because it complements the second factor. A lot of databases are being stolen or reused, or and they're available on the dark web. And if you don't use a password manager, chances are you will be reusing your password or something that you can remember.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all the passwords. At Nord we publish each year the most used passwords that we can find on the net. And the reason why those are the most used passwords are because people need to remember them, and they make them easy. But if you use a password manager, you can use a password phrase like, I don't know, the cat sat on a hot tin roof, for instance. That's your passphrase, which is not easily guessable. And that's the only thing you need to remember for your password manager. And your password manager can add totally random sounding passwords that are actually random for each and every site. So that's already one layer of defense. But then again, if you want to protect a specific website, then you need the second factor, because the second factor is outside of the database. It gets calculated. So even if your your password gets intercepted, because man in the middle in the browser, there's so many ways that this can happen. It's almost impossible to have a secret that changes over time, like the Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator, to predict that kind of thing. So always use those two at least as your basic security.
Do you have any favorites for password managers, either for companies or for individuals? I mean, obviously it's all individuals, but I'm saying if you're going to roll it out throughout the enterprise, it's one situation. But if you're just one individual person looking for a password manager, do you have any recommendations?
If I'm for single, it kind of depends on use case. For a granny, I would say use the one in your browser. Not more difficult than that, but start using one. And obviously, for Nord, we also have a password manager which is available. But it depends a bit on your password flow and your whole identity flow. I know a couple of them which I, as a company, would really like to use, because they have different ways of delegating responsibility. So KeyHub would be one, for instance. But also, of course, you can still use LastPass, which is a really well-known one. Bitwarden, if you want to do open source. And I still recommend the Nord Locker, which is our own password manager, because I know that we work very hard not to know about anything about our customers. So for privacy, I would
super important.
Nord. Yes.
Yeah, and then when you look at different password managers, are there some other like nice to have features? For example, one of the things that I like when I'm in a organizational environment is the ability to share passwords in a secure manner.
Yes, that's also important. And again, please have a look at KeyHub, because they do something a bit different, and the passwords get automatically cycled, and there's so much thought in there. But it's a bit expensive and heavyweight. But for most companies, password sharing is one. But also you want to be able to quickly cycle all your passwords when somebody gets offboarded. This is really important, because otherwise somebody can use your password manager, just copy that password, and when he or she leaves the company, can still reuse that password. So you need to be able to hook it into your offboarding process as well. And that's not all password managers are not fit for that. Another nice to have feature that I personally like, and that is, it reminds me of how long ago I did not log in to a specific website. And why this is important is that if I don't go to a website, like let's say a local store, a butcher has a website store, I make an account, I never go there anymore for quite a while, and the butcher goes out of business, but the website is still online, it will get hacked, and the database will get stolen, and the passwords will be used, or all my data from that site will be used. So it's a good idea, if you haven't gone to a website in, like, let's say 180 days, to remove your account, because you're not going there, but you're still leaving valuable information, which is about you, in that website. So remove that data.
Okay, I think that's some very good advice. I know, obviously based in Europe, GDPR and other kind of privacy regulations are incredibly important for you and your organization. What are some things that you recommend people, or companies, I should say, companies who, you manage your employee data, you have your vendor data, you have customer data, you may be processing, you may be a data processor. What are some things that you think that organizations need to be aware of these days?
They really should have somebody for the role of DPO, Data Protection Officer. It's a lot more complex than just saying, oh, we don't process any data, or we do, because especially with the cloud, you have something with all the software as a service providers. You also need to check who's the data processor, what type of data is it, special data, or do we actually need to process that data, because GDPR says you can process just about anything you want, as long as there's a valid reason for it. So let's say if you need it because of your business, there's a valid reason to process data, and you can. But this is why I say have a DPO, because there's legalities, there's technicalities, and there's of course a lot of departments that also need to fall in line with this. So yeah, it's a lot of paperwork, but it helps if you do it at least once really right, and
Hmm.
then do an upkeep every year. Because after that, after you do it once, it's not that much work anymore. Just have it checked and have one person have the role of data protection officer.
Yeah, it's really, really important. I kind of think of it as, regardless of the potential fines and everything like that, it's just good basic practice these days. I mean, if you think about all the different data that we as individuals and as organizations touch, and if you think about the toxicity of some of that data or the potential toxicity, you need somebody that's like, hey, gonna kind of manage that, or keep an eye on what's going on.
Yeah, and check your vendors, because that's really is nowadays one of the biggest issues actually. Let's say, for instance, you want to use Amazon's Recognize platform, which is an AI for recognizing people and items on images or moving images. It works absolutely fine. It has amazing capabilities. However, in the terms of service, there are some items which you might not agree with, like you agree with that Amazon can use the data or the tags inside it to further their own purposes. And that's something that might not agree with the valid reasons why you are processing data. So you really need to check your finally somebody needs to read those terms and services. Yes.
Absolutely. Hey, I noticed on your bio that you have some experience in Africa.
Yes.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you were doing there, and then I have some questions about like the kind of current landscape.
Sure. Um, well, it was in the 1990s, and we were at a company party, and then our director said, "Yes, we're going to do one of the first commercial internet providers in Africa, and it will be the first one in Tanzania." And I was thinking, okay, cool. Who is going to do that? And then he turned to me and said, "Adrianus is going to go there next month."
It must have been a great party, man.
Yeah. So I was not prepared with anything, so it was really an adventure. And so we had quite some fun in figuring things out. It was with the Intelsat. I used a satellite to make the connection. I had to do a lot of work with the modem firmware, and it was really an adventure. It was fun. In the end, it was used for mostly people who wanted to avoid the very costly prices of faxing through landlines to all throughout the world, because there was a lot of shipping and handling in Dar es Salaam. So, but yeah, it was fun.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've lived overseas off and on for 20 something years, and I remember some places at some times, a fax, a 2-page fax could cost you $10 to transmit overseas, and if you had a 50-page document, well, hey, get out your
Hey,
checkbook or your credit card, because yeah, it
yeah,
costs money.
exactly
Uh,
that.
yeah,
Yes.
I was actually in Taiwan when there were only 2 ISPs, and they were both set up by foreigners. Actually, I should back up. There were two ISPs that were easy for foreigners to sign up with, and if you had to be careful, because I mean, these were just guys that were set this up in apartments, small apartments in Taipei. But if you got on their bad side, you were cut off, man. So
Yeah.
like no access to the internet, email, or anything. So those are fun days. Um, it's interesting because we kind of touched on it earlier, but a lot of some of the kind of scam mails do originate typically in Nigeria and other places in Africa, which may kind of lend to the belief that they're somehow have technologically somewhat sophisticated. But what is the reality there, both in terms of the technology that they're using to launch attacks, but also, I mean, I look at third world countries, or second world, or however you want to define them, and they are, I don't care how economically developed there are some institutions there are organizations there that have money that must be targets. And I wonder, for the attackers, are they targeting these countries or organizations that are obviously not as sophisticated as, say, some of the firms in Europe or the US?
The first thing to know is that as long as the moment that somebody is online, there is no technology gap anymore between this person or the next person in the world. Well, of course, there's some things like the Chinese firewall, but essentially everybody can get the same type of servers, the same type of software all around the world. So an attacker from Africa can just go to a cloud service and have exactly the same capabilities as a pen tester from Northern America or Europe. So this is something we need to keep in mind when we talk about these things. It's just that the first thing is that these attackers, they will not as quickly target indigenous African countries, organizations, simply because, well, local law, if you make a local victim and you're a local perpetrator, it's always easier for law enforcement to find you or do something with you in justicial proceedings. So one of the things that's in hacking and cybersecurity, like for ages, like since the beginning, is you always try to cross borders.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because law enforcement then has to go through all the bureaucratic stuff upstairs, and they need to negotiate, and the laws need to align. So you always try to cross borders. So when you're an attacker from Africa, you're not going to make a lot of victims in Africa, because that's simply not good practice. This is also why it's easier just to randomly send stuff outside in the world. However, some of them will do that with simple phishing scams, which they run once or twice, and they will do that because, for instance, it's really easy to get local money transfers. Money transfers, local, of course, are a lot faster than international again. This also explains a bit why the cryptocurrencies will always be interesting for criminals, and why things like PayPal or these other things, Stripe, are easily used also as well. But for Africans, as for defending, you will see in the coming future, in the coming 5 to 10 years, that while the second world, third world is also getting more and more online, they will also be attacked in the same or maybe even worse ways, because they're already struggling financially to get the companies off the ground. And as you know, that it was until quite recently that European and North American, actually Western companies, struggled. The CISOs and security departments struggled with getting funding at all to defend their companies. It was a really fun meme that CISO with a zero budget but still had to defend against multi-million dollar funded criminals. We are past that point, luckily, I would say, in the Western world. We will get exactly the same thing in the developing countries. They are happy that they're getting online. They will do digitizing a lot, and then they will finally, hopefully, get some funding to do their defense and get the defensive measures in order.
It's funny you say that, because I think in the U.S., the hiring a CISO and giving them a budget and some autonomy and responsibility is widely accepted. But earlier you mentioned data protection officer. That is it probably evolving a little bit more slowly than it is in Europe. It is happening here in all major organizations, especially like healthcare organizations. Anything in regulated industry, they're going to have a DPO. But a lot of other organizations, they just look at it as an expense. And if you look at it that way, it's kind of hard to rationalize it. But so let me ask you, if you were a new CISO and you just you had to put together your 90-day plan, what are some of the key things that you would work towards?
The first thing always is get your asset list in order.
Mm-hmm.
Know what you have and know where everything is. Then the next part would be my authorization matrix. Know who has access. We talked about this password manager. Well, if you have a really good corporate password solution, or actually credential or security solution, you can have an insight on who has access to what. And the other thing would be is get your patch management cadence. Actually, the 90-day plan, it's really fun, but in 90 days, there's not enough you can do. But I would really check all of those things, and then I would check if we had a response available. Not every company needs to have their own incident responders, but I would check if there's a contract or at least a phone number which we can call if something goes wrong. And I would check the backups. But basically, the most important thing is get your asset list and your authorization matrix. Because we see so many times that it's either a bad lever or an insider, or it's because people don't know which machines they had or which are part of their network, and suddenly there's lateral movement all across your whole network because this one machine was never updated because it wasn't on any list at all.
The human element all over the place. Yes.
Always, yes.
Hey, how do you keep abreast of, of things related to cybersecurity? I'm going to ask you that. And then I'm going to also ask you if you have any book recommendations, not necessarily on cybersecurity, but it could be that relates to the world that we're living in that somehow would bring back to security. So, for example, I'm reading a book right now called The Sovereign Individual. What are your recommendations there, both for professional kind of education ongoing and then kind of a broader view?
Can you repeat the first part again? Because there's two things. We had this book, and what did you ask?
Oh, I'm sorry. In terms of like, how do you keep abreast of latest trends in cybersecurity,
Yes.
etc.?
Well, one thing is to read a lot and to glance at a lot of sites. And of course, I have this aggregation, which almost everybody who has ever been in a CISO role has, but most of the cybersecurity professionals as well, like this RSS aggregation, and you see then just a general gist. You don't read all of the tweets and all of the news articles, but you can just get a kind of a feel for what you should read. And then I read hacker news a lot, but also the Dutch site called Tweakers, which is about hacking in the hardware. But also I look a bit at LinkedIn, like the professional website, to see what other CISOs or what other security professionals are saying. And there's a couple of other podcasts you can listen to. But basically, it's staying in contact with a lot of other cybersecurity professionals. Mm-hmm. Because this in cybersecurity community, sharing is really a good and big thing. So if somebody of my friends knows about a new attack that's coming up, they will notify me about this if they think it's relevant for me. So and having good contacts, having good social contacts is actually your strongest weapon in this part, because you simply can you can either spend all of your day reading stuff and then knowing what's going on, but then you don't have any time to execute any actions on that. Or you can be actionable all day and have no time for reading anything. So sharing the burden is really a good idea on that.
Yeah, I'm a member of the ISSI Puget Sound chapter, and I learn so much whenever I go to the meetings. That our chapter president, I think that's his title, he does a really good job of bringing in speakers that are not just there to promote their widget or their technology, but actually, talk about the threat landscape, some, best practices, etc. And then in addition to that, they'll do like a kind of a weekly or monthly roundup. Here are some of the things, top level news things. Here's what initially happened. Here were the outcomes. And it's just like, every time I go there, it's basically 2 or 3 different case studies, and I'm learning. And for me, that's much more effective than looking at a bunch of tweets, because it's like those are so many different rabbit holes that I can go down and
No,
But
exactly what you're saying. The reason what I said with this tweets and news aggregates is that if I suddenly see everybody talking about kind of the same thing, it means, okay, now I need to pay
gotta
attention what's going on.
exactly. No, it's all good. And then my second question was about any type of kind of broader, higher level books or things that you'd like to recommend.
One book about hacking I like to recommend a lot is The Cuckoo's Egg by Clifford Stoll. And the reason is that it's actually the first documented case where Clifford Stoll, a US physicist actually, who just wanted to have a small job after his PhD, actually discovered how the Chaos Computer Club hackers and behind it the KGB did the first hack in university computers and tried to steal government secrets. And this is a true story. It just with proper logs from that time, because I don't want to spoil anything, but Clifford Stoll used some lateral thinking to solve the problem, and it's a really awesome book to read. And if you've read that book, there's a corollary book from the Chaos Computer Club itself, in which they describe the other side of those times. So, The Cuckoo's Egg by Clifford Stoll.
That's awesome. They're going on my reading list, and I like the fact that the Chaos Computer Club put out something and say, like, this is what we were doing at the same time, and it's kind of like. There was a Clint Eastwood movie about the attack of Okinawa, and you see the first movie is from the Americans' point of view, and the second movie is from the Japanese point of view, and it's like, whoa, it's a very revealing. Yes, very interesting. Well, hey, Adrianus, I really enjoyed this conversation, and it's been nice meeting you. Do you have any plans to visit the U.S. for work or anything?
Not on my agenda. I've visited the US a couple of times, and a couple of times for work, a couple of times for pleasure. You have an awesome country. Just keep it awesome. That would be really nice.
Dude,
it would be really nice.
That's a whole nother rabbit hole in discussion, and I just don't. Why is everybody so angry all the time? I mean, yeah, it is awesome, and I'm looking out here at the mountains and the trees, and I just don't understand where all this anger comes from. But people in politics, it just is what it is. But hey, it would be great to cross paths in person sometime. If you ever do make it out to the West Coast, let me know. Otherwise, I'll touch base with you in a few months. I'll let you know after I read the books. I'll give you some feedback on that. And please keep in touch, and wish you the best, you and Nord Security the best for the remainder of 2022.
Likewise.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.